I have a presentation that's about 25 minutes, and then I'd love to hear comments at the end. I'm going to talk first about Dawn's drawings from films, and then about how her work with film informed her other drawings of interiors and still life. Dawn drew images from films and TV soap operas from early on, but I'm going to focus on her best-known body of work, which she began in 2003, the year she first showed in New York City at Pierogi Gallery, Interiors from Films and from Life. In the signature film drawings, rather than focusing on the iconography of the actors, the hairstyles, clothing, etc., which she had done in her earlier work, she said she wanted to really examine something intrinsic to the film medium, the space and time in cinema, from the classical studio mode, especially melodramas. So, watching a video of a movie, she logged shots of a room or rooms that interested her, and then drew a composite image of the entire space, using ballpoint pen, gouache, or sumi ink on paper. This is Mrs. Jessica Drummond's bedroom from the 1946 film My Reputation, and it's ballpoint pen on paper. Dawn limited herself to only what the camera showed. So the drawings, while highly detailed, include absences of blank space, areas of the space the camera never showed, and shifting points of view and scale. For example, within this piece, the area at the far right was in a long shot, so it looks relatively small. And then the camera was a tracking shot, kind of when it came over to Barbara Stanwyck's face, it really zoomed in for a close-up, so the head was very large in the frame, and the drawing becomes much larger here than it is here. The comparison, and you can see the whole drawing is in a bigger scale than it is here. Also, you can notice the absence of this leg on this chair because the camera never showed that leg. And in the bathroom, this is where Jessica Drummond, the character Barbara Stanwyck, was standing, so the camera never showed this part of the bathroom. These are large. This drawing is 20 feet long and 8 feet high, so it's very large, very vivid, predominantly naturalistic representations of interiors. So when you're standing in front of one of these drawings, it takes time to see it. You literally cannot see all of it at once. I'll show you some details of this piece. The notations also bring us close to read. Dawn typically made notations directly on her drawings as she worked. It might be timestamps, dialogue, marginal sketches, and other ephemera from life, like phone numbers, names, book titles, or song lyrics that she heard on the radio while she was working. Here, which is often the case, the notations are in the margin. You can see here, this one is partially covered up by the drawing. Often they're within the actual drawing too. I think there's some notation right here. But because they're hard to read in these small reproductions, I'm going to show you, this is just kind of a random page from one of her notebooks. Dawn watched a lot of films, and she typically made notes as she was watching. This is from a film, and here's the drawing that she made, and here's some of the dialogue. I'm going with, she started to write him and changed it to him. I'm going with him. Don't tell me you still love him. A lot of people loved my husband, but he never loved anybody. That's why he's dead. So this is just to kind of give you an idea of the kind of thing that she would notate. So when we step in to read the notations, we then have to step back to see the image. So our gaze is also shifting like the camera. Like the films, in a way, the drawings sweep us in a naturalistic representation, absorbing us in their beautiful play of light and shadow. But like the films, they're also markedly artificially constructed. The multiple vantage points, the textual notation, and paper that bears the traces of being folded and patched. As is well known, Dawn folded the paper that she was drawing on into smallish rectangles to work on a manageable amount at a time. And then she would unfold the paper to work on the next section. And when she revised or changed scale, she pasted in another paper, as in here. She actually started here, and then she pasted in one paper to make the drawing larger. This piece is Travels with Myra Hudson. It's from the 1952 film Sudden Fear, and it's 10 feet tall and 46 feet long. And here's an installation photo of it at the Saatchi Gallery in London, just to give you an idea of the size. The structure of this piece is diagrammatic rather than naturalistic. The area on the left is a drawing of the character Myra Hudson's study and the staircase of her home in San Francisco. And then there's the train cars here. And then on the right is New York City location. So as in a map of the United States, the east is on the right and the west is on the left. Again, there's shifting vantage points. Obviously, the staircase is huge compared to the rest. There's also flattening out of corners, like here in the study. Here's a window. These doors this wall would be at a 90-degree angle to this wall. This would be at a 90-degree angle. And comes around here. You can see the flattening out of corners as the camera moved through the space. Also, you can see, again, absences of areas that were not shown. And there was kind of a nice one here. And in the railroad car. This drawing is called Mrs. Bourne's Bedroom. It's from the film East Side, West Side. And again, the sequence of shots flattens out the box of the room, because this is, again, kind of a small image of what is really a large drawing. I'll just show you. This is the left half of the drawing. And this is the right half. The title is Mrs. Bourne's Bedroom, so we know this is all one room, though it looks like a series of rooms. A clue, in addition to the title, is this corner here. Here's this corner. So this whole wall, this would be one whole wall in the film, and where the bed is in the film, this wall, is actually opposite the window. But even if we don't know the film, haven't seen the film, we can see that the space is very labyrinthine. Though it seems like it should be coherent, it's hard to parse, and that's obviously intentional. This film is a melodrama, as were most of the films Stone drew from. Melodrama, more than foregrounding a cause and effect plot, prioritizes emotional logic, mise en scène, that is, the settings, and rhythmic movement. Musicals do this too, which Dawn also loved, and she loved all the classical Hollywood genres. But melodramas especially focused on domestic life. They were called women's pictures. And emotion. They were called weepies. And they also heavily use camera movement. One way people used to divide film directors was whether they mostly used camera movement within a shot, as with the director Murnau, or montage, editing shots, as with Eisenstein. Dawn often said she was very into camera movement. I'm temperamentally more on the montage side, but that's another story. Movement in the motion picture medium conveys animacy and presence. In film, it's not a representation of movement, but the image actually moving as we watch. The moving camera also subtly indicates thinking and framing, presenting, which interested Dawn. This is from the film, this is titled Barney from the film Léon Morin by Melville. Film theorists in the 1970s, which Dawn and I read, saw the medium as uniquely combining strong presence via the movement of images and the use of photography, and also strong absence. The images are just projected light. They're virtual, illusory. Hollywood style conceals the construction of the images, mainly through our identification with characters. Dawn was closely examining how the films work. Motion pictures were the preeminent medium of the 20th century, and Dawn's work with women's pictures keys into central issues of modern industrial and consumer capitalist society. In modern capitalism, the economic sphere of production is fragmented and alienating and split from the household. The home is the women's sphere of reproducing workers, a supposedly comforting refuge, but also a prison for women. As Dawn often said in interviews, in melodramas, the doors are unlocked, but somehow the women can never leave. The film Melodrama expresses underlying tensions, dreams, and desires that can't be reconciled in the ideology of the happy wife and mother. From the 19th century, commodity culture, where people are alienated from the means of production of what we use, is a world of images. And for privileged men, a compensatory benefit in the unstable, anonymous city was flânerie, a pleasure in the ambulatory gaze, a heightened perception available walking the streets. For women, and for men too, this was sanctioned as the gaze of shopping and moviegoing, what cultural theorist Anne Friedberg called the mobile virtual gaze. People tend to split Dawn's film drawings from her other work, but I see them as integrally connected, and she spoke of them as mutually informing. She made her first film interior drawing in 2003, and that is the same year she made Kitchen and Bathroom, the first work of hers I ever saw, at her first solo show in New York at Pierogi. In Kitchen and Bathroom, here different angles are presented on one plane. Here's, for example, here's a corner. This wall would be at a 90-degree angle to this wall, which would be here at a 90-degree angle to this wall. Also, in real life, Dawn's toilet in the bathroom was directly opposite the sink. But even if you don't actually know Dawn's bathroom, there's a clue to this in that the mirror here over the sink reflects the shower curtain. That was a detail that Dawn especially liked. So this is the same thing that we saw her do in the film drawings, where she sutured together different camera angles. Her drawings from life are almost always rooms and still lifes, just as the film drawings are domestic interiors. She represented the mobile virtual gaze of modernity in what was historically women's domain, the domestic sphere. This is two tables in my kitchen, and in terms of the mobile gaze, this is typical of her. The bottom of the drawing here, our angle is from above, looking down, and here at the top, it's more of a head-on view. So it's as though our head's tilting up. The same thing happens in this drawing. where we're looking more face on at the chandelier, and then up here, we're looking up. And beautifully, Dawn really links the two angles through this chain, which draws our eye up and down like a movie camera tilt. Here with the squash, again, there's two different angles. Here they're adjacent to each other. This drawing is my bed, Plein de Deux Légère. It's a very large drawing, and I think the mobile virtual gaze that I'm talking about is also indicated by every area of the drawing being equally vivid in focus. Here's a detail. And this is not a single view. Every inch of the drawing has equal detail with equal focus. I think a film drawing like this is Hélène from Les Dames du Bois de Boulogne, where each area is an equal focus and attention. So, as in the film work, these drawings from life are generally large, highly naturalistic images, while markedly constructed from multiple vantage points and incorporating the folds of the paper and the notations, which move us in and out of the drawing and also demand time to see. This is 3 tables in Rome. It's 20 feet long and 7 feet tall. The cinematic mobile view, I think, is evident throughout this drawing, but I think it's most overt on the right-hand tabletop. Here's the detail. In addition to that tilt up, the changes in tonality signal shifting light in a passage of time. The shadow of this fruit here is in one direction, and the shadow of this fruit is on the right is in another direction. Also notice that the shadow here on the right ends at the fold of the paper like a cropped frame. We could call this a jump cut. In film, if that's a cut that doesn't cover over an ellipsis of time. And a favorite jump cut of mine is in Peonies in the upper left, where it's clear that the flower must have moved. And this is a detail that I took it when it was shown at Pierogi. It's really beautiful. I don't know if this piece has a title, but it's a triptych that Dawn made at Yaddo in 2017. And here each drawing shows the same table still life. The one on the left eliminates the contours and shadows, and the one here in the middle is a daytime view where the light is coming from the window and there are deep shadows. And the one on the right is a nighttime view, or even if we don't know it's a nighttime view, clearly the room is lit up and the window is now a mirror. I can't help but see this piece as a film montage in which the shots are separated by the space of the wall. And when we're standing before these drawings in person, we can only compare them across the cuts in memory.
Thank you very much. First off, I'd like to open this up to our viewers to pose some questions for Michele, if they have any. And in the meantime, I'll ask a few. Obviously, you were a very good friend of Dawn's. Did you speak to her much about her intention when you're talking about jump cuts or the camera panning?
I really got that from Dawn's artist talks, which you can find online. She talked about it also in print interviews. She did talk about that. Yeah, I didn't really. I talked somewhat about that with her. She definitely saw her eye when she was drawing as being like the camera in the films. She often said that.
It's a very interesting idea because, as my wife Jeanette has said, when she was in grade school and high school, she'd be in the school cafeteria and she was blinking and acting as though that was her camera. It
Mm-hmm.
photographs she was taking, and she thought they would be shown or remembered by her after she was gone. I'm intrigued
Mm-hmm.
because Jeanette and Dawn were also quite close.
Mm-hmm.
And this idea of jump cuts is really amazing. And I think fabulous that you pointed out. Can you expand on that just a little bit more about the jump cuts? Did you see it in a lot of her work?
No. As I said before, when it was hard to hear me, Dawn was much more into camera movement than she was into editing, really. So she tends to have that panoramic gaze. It's more subtle, which she really liked. So there's a shifting point of view, but it happens very subtly. Whereas this, what we're calling the jump cut, is a much more overt ellipsis, or change in view.
I think we should point out that in many of the works, she's actually marking or recording on the work where she is like 43 minutes point
Mm-hmm. The timestamp.
or whatever. So she's recording down to the second where that image is. So for instance, I've got a work in my collection which is called Smoking Room Titanic from
Mm-hmm.
1953. And it's amazing because as you pan across this interior, you see that she stitched it together from the act of watching the entire film. And she had to go back and retrieve certain things. So she's moving back and forth as she's going from left to right. She even has to record a detail from a scene, and she has to go back in the film and find it. Did you talk to her much about that? Or did you ever watch her as she was working with a film?
No. No. I mean, the time I spent most with Dawn was in the later years of her life, and these film drawings were extremely time consuming. And when she was not well, she really couldn't do it. It was just too much for her.
Right.
So,
Um, so some of the films you're referring to, did you ever ask her what her interest was in, uh, let's say, in particular, the female heroines in these films? There's a particular type of woman that appears in some of the films you've just shown for us. Did you talk to her about that at all?
oh yes, we talked about films all the time, and we watched them together. And we talked at length about it. Yeah. Mhm.
You talk about female protagonists with her much.
Yes, and also male protagonists, because she was watching a lot of westerns, as you know, towards the end, which she called the male melodrama, and also men in melodramas too, like in Douglas Sirk films. But yeah, I mean, again, in the drawings, she was really more interested in the space and time of the film than she was in the characters. Um, that's what's really conveying the emotion.
Right. So this
Yeah.
idea of male melodrama, she talked about this in the very last interview I had with her, which was October 28th, uh, 2018. So really, no, yeah. So it was really just about a month and a half before she died. And she was talking about this idea of male camaraderie, of that she thought violence was overstated as a concept in Westerns, and it was really about relationships. Did she talk to you about that much?
Oh, she talked about the westerns as being um, that the space of the westerns, which interested her. It was an open space as opposed to the closed interiors of the women's pictures. And as you know, she didn't really like to draw outdoor locations. She liked rooms, so she didn't really deal with that very much. In terms of the westerns, she also, though, was interested in how the men wound up being trapped. She loves the term box canyon, um, which relates to her drawing for sure, because they were also trapped, in their roles.
She
And
loved
that the ideology of masculinity just as the women were, and femininity.
she loved trains. I'm going to tell you a little personal story, which is funny. When we were both at Brown, I was doing a study on pirate materials from 1700 to 1771. Captain Charles Johnson, and there was one copy of this book in uh, Kansas City. And I said, I'm going to take a train from Providence to Kansas City. And she said, can I come? I was like, sure, if you really want to. So we got on this train, we went all the way out there. And I think she really loved what you see even in this work here, this idea of moving through time.
Mm-hmm.
I told her a story that I thought was really interesting. I grew up in Chicago, and I'd taken a train from Chicago to Colorado, and a grasshopper had hopped onto the compartment. I was between compartments, there was an open window, and I told her I was really intrigued with this concept that the grasshopper then moved for, whatever it was, a dozen miles till I could get it to go back out.
Right.
And she loved this concept. She loved
Mm-hmm.
the concept of the moving panorama. Can we talk about that a little bit, even in a work like this, where she's expressing time, almost this fluidity of time and space, like almost
Mm-hmm.
like travel in a train across.
Exactly. That's what I was speaking about, the mobile virtual gaze of modernity, which is, the train came about in that time period. And yeah, absolutely. The shifting points of, well, the size, so that we have to move when we're looking at the piece. This, you can't, on the screen you can see it all at once, but in real life it's huge, so we're moving through the space. The shifting points, the points of view, shifts in scale, all of these things contribute to that feeling of the that we're being swept along in this movement.
I think she loved
Absolutely. And
trains.
it's both very naturalistic but also artificial,
Right.
and she uses a lot of windows and mirrors throughout all of these works, and the train window. And I know she loved riding the bus in New York City for that reason, because she's the window. She said it's like going to the movies, looking out the window. Um, this idea of windows and mirrors um, being, again, like the sort of tension between is it a naturalistic representation? Is it transparent? Or is it a framed view? Is it constructed? And that tension was something that really, I think, really interested her. Um,
Did she do?
and the movement of her, she never wanted things to be, she liked stillness that moves. She never wanted things to be frozen, she always said. So I think that shifting point of view, the eye or the camera eye, um, that's why she did that. And that is, as I said, that's kind of like a real characteristic of modernity. I mean, it's really speaking to something very central in our culture, and she was really extending that to women, to women's world. Um,
Did you
yeah.
talk to her much about Alfred Hitchcock and um, the camera moving in Hitchcock?
Well, there was the film Under Capricorn, where there was this fantastic. He was more of an editing person, but there was this, in Under Capricorn, he used a lot of moving camera
Mhm.
that she really loved. It was the same, I think the same cinematographer that did Black Narcissus, which she also really loved.
Right.
And there was a shot where it starts outside on the patio, and then it cranes up, and then it goes through the window, and then we see Ingrid Bergman in bed, and it's all one fluid shot, and she just really loves that. She hoped to draw that. Yeah, that's the kind of thing she really got into.
She loved Grand Central Station, and anybody who'd ever been there with her probably heard this. But she said to me, "James, I walk in, I just feel like a star. I just feel like I'm in a movie." And no matter how many times I've been in here, and I think she loved North by Northwest. She loved the kind of the succession of events and how
Yeah.
scenes would take place in a train compartment, and then in the diner, and what it signified, and all that. Let's see, Liz, do we have any questions from the audience that you're spotting and you could help us? Liz is going to, she's been looking at the questions as you and I have been talking. Okay, let's see. Okay, there we go. The last one is from Becky Brown. I'm wondering about the films as source material versus pleasure or enrichment from them as artwork, which might depend on the type of film. I'm thinking about films with more explicit authorship versus quote unquote guilty pleasures like soap operas. Michele?
I'm not sure what she's asking. I mean, I understand the difference between the types of films, which Dawn didn't really make a distinction. But, you know, as we know, she was very non-hierarchical, and she thought of, you know, soap operas or the pedestrian Hollywood films as being just as, you know, worthy of attention as, you know, the European auteur. So she didn't really make those kinds of distinctions. She actually really liked things that didn't call too much attention to their making. Again, she liked the subtlety and I think the ambiguity between, you know, how you're absorbed into a film without noticing that it's constructed, but then you could sort of take it apart and see how actually it is constructed. That tension interested her more than something that's very obviously constructed.
There's a question here which actually I think both of us could help reply to, which is, did Dawn have access to the films? I presume she's rewinding footage versus drawing from memory. For the most part, she was using the actual film. She had an old TV monitor and she would freeze the frame and move through the film, and I think remember or look at where it was to record the time sequence. Is that your recollection as well, Michele?
Yeah, I mean, I talked about that in the beginning and I think it was hard to hear me, but yes, she went through the film on video and logged the timestamps of where the rooms were that she wanted to draw and what shots. And sometimes she changed her mind. Like this closet, at first she used a shot of it that was flat on, and then she removed it. You can't see it in this small piece, but she took it out and pasted in a different shot because it just looked better. And then she actually used the original closet drawing as just a standalone piece that I think she showed at Leslie Heller Gallery.
So Roberto Bocci has asked, did Dawn ever write a screenplay for cinema? To my knowledge, no.
Yeah.
No.
So.
In fact, I was asking Steve Katz, who was the head of the Film Society at Brown, where Dawn was making these calendars. He remembered her coming in and getting stills and then cutting them out and using rubber cement to make the weekly calendar. So in a funny way, even then she was selecting a particular scene and highlighting it to exemplify something bigger. Here's one about, did she ever include the main character twice? Or like in My Reputation, Barbara Stanwyck in front of the mirror, does she draw her in bed? Do you know, she did sometimes include a character twice. Is that right, Michele?
In the same drawing?
Yes. Like it's a little sketch on the side where she's working.
Oh, sure. Yes. On the marginal notations. Yeah, absolutely.
And we should talk about the marginal notations a little bit because they're so important to her work.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
It's more
I mean, they're hard. It's hard to read them on the.
Right. We don't have a good slide of it here.
Yeah. This is maybe.
Just one.
Yeah.
To me, they're almost like footnotes in most books are something people kind of skim through, but certain writers, you know, the footnotes are actually as important as the actual text.
Mm-hmm.
I think Dawn falls in that camp. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, she often said that I mean, in her observation, people tend, when they see text, they tend to want to read it. So they do move in to read it. And the near far thing of moving in to read it and then pulling back out to see the image was something that really interested her. Again, it was like a camera movement.
To me, the little notations on the side are almost like someone who's doing a big opera, a big work, and then they kind of go like this and say something that twists the knife, that really hits it.
Yeah.
I feel like that's what she's doing sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of them are like even the bit of dialogue that I read, they're very funny. And I see them also as kind of like bringing in sound to the films, to the drawings, the sound of dialogue.
There's an interesting idea. Somebody asked about guilty pleasures of soap opera. That's an interesting point to me, because when we were at Brown, Dawn would go to film almost every night. She would go to the films, and I was like, I'd love to go, but I got to go study. Like, I'm going to the library. I'll see you after. It to me was a guilty pleasure, but to her, I do not believe she thought it as a guilty pleasure.
No, not at all.
Incorporating the greatest joy in her life into her work. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And she was indefatigable. I mean, like if there was a series, I remember telling her, oh, there's a series of French melodramas at the Quad. She'd be, and I'd think like maybe there's one that I'd like to see. She would like mark down like 6 or 7 and go. I mean, she went after treatment to see like 2 or 3, in a row. I mean, she made notes on them.
I'm
She
trying
would
to
also watch things repeatedly too.
she went
She'd
to
watch them over and over again.
She went to film even when she was really fighting her cancer, and I think they went to a double feature. I'm trying to remember who saw it with her, but Dawn was sitting on a chair, which I heard this story. This is so amazing. The chair was broken, so it was that kind of like an extreme forward tilt. So you basically had to be doing like um, an exercise in order to hold yourself from not falling forward.
Mm-hmm.
And they changed seats for the last 5 minutes or something. And she said, how could you even be sitting in this? This is impossible. And
Yeah.
she for over 3 hours, like bolt upright, which is the way she sat.
Mm-hmm.
Another one from Carol. When Dawn first passed away, in conversations with 2 other friends who grew up with her, they both commented on picturing her looking out the school bus window, whether going to or from school and when traveling to from away games. So it started early.
Yeah.
I think that she had this incredible interior dialogue, which served her well, but she was able to totally focus on a film without her mind drifting. Hey, did you notice that when you went to films with her?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Like
She
she
was so
was
keyed in.
absorbing absolutely everything. Just amazing. Um, were there any other questions that we should go over, Liz, that you see? Um, Michele, I want to thank you very much for joining us. I'm so sorry that there were a couple of technological glitches, but that's our world as we know it.
It
Uh,
is.
you shared so much. We're going to have our tech guy, Dylan Everett, who I forgot to thank and would like to. He's going to work on the audio, and
Okay.
um, he'll perfect it. Another idea for the recording is we might have you re-record it at your leisure with a microphone
That's fine.
for posterity on the gallery site. I'm not necessary in this thing, but you are. So Michele, thank you so much. And thank you everybody who joined us. The show is up through Saturday. We have substantial documentation of it. We realize so few people are able to get here during COVID. We'd like to tell everybody to stay well. I know Dawn would have said that as well. Take proper precautions. We're going to get through it. I know Dawn would have wanted me to say yesterday was a huge day in America. It's sad that she got the prognosis of triple negative the day that Trump was elected, which I can identify as the worst day of my life. Yesterday was one of the best days of my life. Like we turned the corner, and I missed Dawn yesterday. I thought, how much she would have loved to see Trump get on that helicopter and get, she would have loved to see every aspect of the pageantry, the poetry. Everything yesterday was like a dream, including the executive mandates, which went into effect. So, Michele, thank you once again. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're all fabulous. And Dawn would have said to everybody out there, thank you for joining us. So I'll say the same. Take care. Bye-bye.